Today the topic is the purity of mind. It is very important to understand that the teaching of the Buddha is about happiness, how to be happy. Although it is presented in the form of the Four Noble Truths about suffering, the cause of suffering, the ending of suffering, and the way leading to the end of suffering. Although the Buddha spoke about suffering, his aim was to make people free of suffering, which is happiness. So, if you want to be happy, you have to follow the method of the Buddha. This is why the Buddha has said, Sukhanchana vina dhammang. Sukhanchana vina dhammang means, Sukha means happiness. Sukhanchana vina dhammang. Apart from the Dhamma, there is no happiness. That is what that means. Sukhanchana vina dhammang. There is no happiness apart from the Dhamma. Without practicing the Dhamma, you cannot be happy. Today, most people think that happiness is the same thing as pleasure. Pleasure is what we perceive through the senses. When we open our eyes, or open our ears, or the nose, or the tongue, or the body, we begin to experience three kinds of sensations: pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. The pleasant sensation is something that we like. The unpleasant sensation is something that we don't like. So naturally, we begin to desire pleasure and hate pain. And because we desire pleasure and hate pain, our whole life is an effort to maximize pleasure and minimize pain. Pleasure and pain are things that come and go. They are not going to be permanent. So you can't be permanently enjoying pleasures or permanently suffering pain. It comes and goes. They are all impermanent. So, because we have begun to desire pleasure and hate pain, our whole life is spent on trying to get more and more pleasure and to avoid pain as much as we can. But this effort is what makes us unhappy. By trying to get pleasure and avoid pain, we suffer as a result. This is what the Buddha pointed out. The true happiness is not enjoying pleasures or avoiding pain. What the Buddha called suffering or unhappiness is the presence of the desire for pleasure and the presence of the hatred of pain. This desire for pleasure and hatred of pain is not something that we are born with. It is something that we have cultivated. If we never experience pleasure or pleasant sensations, and if we never experienced unpleasant sensations, we would not desire pleasant sensations or hate unpleasant sensations. It is because we happen to experience pleasant sensations and because we happen to experience unpleasant sensations, desires and hatreds arose. And because these desires and hatreds came up, we have cultivated habit because it comes from time to time. Pleasures we experience from time to time. And every time we experience pleasure, we desire it. So the desire came before the desire came after we experienced the pleasure. Before we experienced the pleasure, there was no desire. It is after we experience pleasure that we begin to experience a desire. And when the pleasure is gone, the desire arises. Not when the pleasure is there. It is not in the presence of the desire. It is not in the presence of the pleasure that the desire arises. It is when the pleasure is gone that the desire arises for the pleasure. And when the desire is there is no pleasure. And when the desire is there and there is no pleasure, then we become unhappy. In the same way, when we experience pain, we have no hatred of pain. The hatred comes only after we have experienced the pain. And then, of course, the presence of the pain is uncomfortable. But the absence of the pain is comfortable. So, we hate the pain because the presence of the pain is unpleasant. But what the Buddha pointed out is that this desire for pleasure and the hatred of the pain is what makes us unhappy. So in order to be happy, we have to learn to get rid of this desire and the hatred. It is this desire and the hatred that the Buddha called lobha and dosa. Lobha is the desire for pleasure, and dosa is the hatred of pain. So if we can free the mind of these desires and hatreds, we can be happy. This means the absence of the desire and the hatred is the happiness. We must also understand that a desire is a disturbance of the whole mind and body. It's not just a disturbance of the mind. It is a disturbance of the whole body. If you look at it from a modern scientific point of view, a desire arises means a message goes from the brain to a gland. It's important to understand that there are things called glands in the body, and these glands begin to secrete what is called a hormone into the blood. And the blood carries this hormone to the whole body. And different parts of the body, different organs in the body begin to behave in a special way depending on the hormone. If, say, anger arises, there is a gland called the adrenal gland, and that gland secretes a hormone into the blood called adrenaline. And this hormone is carried to the whole body by the blood vessels. And then disturbances take place in the body. Like the muscles becoming tensed, the muscles all over the body becomes tense, and blood rushes to the face, the heart begins to beat fast, breathing becomes heavy, so many things like that happen in the body. And when that happens, you begin to feel very uncomfortable in the body. This is like an emergency situation. When in a country some planes come and bomb in various places, then of course the country becomes disturbed, and the government will send messages to the people not to go onto the road, You must be inside the house. You must switch off the lights and all kinds of things. And you are not able to go anywhere. You can't really, if you don't have food in your house, you have to be starving. Because you can't go out and buy food. And so much inconvenience and discomfort. So in a similar way, the body begins to behave in a similar way. And the whole body and mind begins to suffer when you have anger. So in the same way, any other emotion, like say fear. Fear can also cause the same troubles in the body. Or even what is called a sexual excitement is a disturbance to the body, although you may not realize it. Worries, anxieties are all disturbances, not only to the mind, it's to the whole body. So to have emotions in your mind is to be suffering. You become unhappy. So the only way to be happy is to learn to get rid of these disturbances. And this is what today people call stress. And people spend a lot of money to learn what is called stress management. The Buddha, long before the Westerners came to know about stress management, the Buddha spoke about this more than 2000 years before the Western people came to know about this thing called stress. But even Buddhists ignore the teachings of the Buddha and go after these modern teachers who try to teach stress management. It's very unfortunate that the Buddhists don't know about stress management. And so, it is very important, therefore, to understand the teachings of the Buddha and learn how to purify the mind, to free the mind of all disturbances, to free the body of all disturbances, and to be calm and relaxed. The mind that is calm and the body that is relaxed is free from these disturbances. And that mind and body, which is calm and relaxed, is the happy mind and body. So this is why it is so important to learn to purify the mind, free the mind of these emotional disturbances. The Buddha has shown the way to purify the mind. And to purify the mind, it is necessary to look at the mind Normally people never look at the mind. People focus their mind on external things. That means on what we see, or what we hear, or what we smell, or what we taste, or what we touch. That is where we focus our mind. And if we begin to focus our mind on these external things, we begin to react to these things automatically. When we experience a pleasant sensation, a desire arises. That is a reaction, not an action. There are two things, reactions and actions. A reaction occurs unconsciously. An action is a conscious action. A deliberate action. These desires and hatreds are unconscious reactions, not actions. So we cannot stop it if it is going on unconsciously. We can stop it only when we become conscious of these things. So if we want to purify the mind, we have to focus our attention on these reactions and not on the objects to which we react. When we see something, if we focus our attention on what we see, we automatically react without our knowledge, unconsciously. But instead of focusing on the object to which we react, if we focus on the reaction, then we become conscious of the reaction and the reaction stops. That is how we can control our mind. This is how we control and stop the reaction. And this turning of the mind inwards to the reaction is what is called satipatthana. Satipatthana, which is today translated as mindfulness. That word mindfulness doesn't convey that meaning at all. It is not mindfulness, it is introspection. The real translation of satipatthana is introspection, looking within, not looking out to the object, but to be looking in to the reaction to the object. So if we can practice that properly, our mind will be purified, and when the mind is purified, the mind is happy. all happiness and unhappiness comes from this. The wrong way and the right way of focusing our attention. So this is what we call proper meditation. So meditation is not concentrating your mind on some object. Meditation is proper introspection, looking within, to observe our thoughts, to observe our speech, and to observe our actions. If we constantly focus our attention on what we think, what we feel, what we speak, and what we do, and how we behave, if we constantly focus our attention on these things, we'll be free from worries and anxieties. We'll be free from all emotional disturbances, and we'll be happy. That is the way to happiness, as taught by the Buddha. It's very simple, but it is very difficult. It is difficult not because it is really difficult, but because we have got into wrong habits. We have been cultivating the wrong kind of habit, and we are carried away by habits. Once we get into a habit, it is very difficult to get rid of it. It is like getting into the habit of smoking or drinking or taking these hallucinogenic drugs. In the same way, it is very difficult to get rid of these normal habits like becoming angry, becoming greedy for things, going after pleasures, and trying to avoid pain. These are also habits. And a habit will continue through practice. The habit is developed through practice. Practice means repetition. If we keep on repeating something, it becomes a habit, and it is very difficult to give up that. But if we want to overcome a habit, what we need is to practice the opposite thing. Practicing the opposite of the habit. If we are in the habit of smoking, instead of repeating that habit of smoking, we can stop one day. Then the second time it is easier to stop. Third time it is even easier than that. The fourth time it is even more easy. So like that. So it is the habit that comes through practice, which is repetition. Now, in order to be able to practice and repeat these things, it is also important to change our goals. The human mind works like a computer. And these computers are what are called goal-seeking machines. They seek goals. So in the same way, our mind is also seeking goals all the time. So we have to examine the goal that we are trying to reach in our life. Our life is also carried on through goal seeking. Some people even don't know what the goal is. So it is very important to understand the goal that we are trying to get at. And a habit will be continuing only because of the goal. So if we change our goal, we begin to change our behavior. This is why the method of practice that the Buddha spoke of is called the Noble Eightfold Path, usually. And that path begins with the right understanding. You have to first understand the problem and then the solution. And this is what the Buddha spoke of in what is called the Four Noble Truths. And the Four Noble Truths talk about suffering, the cause of suffering, the end of suffering, and the way to end suffering. When you begin to understand this, you begin to understand that the cause of this suffering is our emotions. And our emotions depend on the way we think. So first thing is to change our thinking, to change the way we look at the world and our life. And once we have done that, we begin to change the direction we are going to. Our life is turned in some direction, like going north or south, or east or west. We are going towards a goal. And if we can understand what that is, because it is happening quite unconsciously, we don't know about it, we are not fully aware. So gradually, when we begin to understand it, and when we see that we are trying to do something which is producing unhappiness rather than happiness, then we begin to stop going in that direction and we begin to go in the right direction. So that changing of the goal is what I call reorientation. Reorientation is changing the goal. It is by changing the goal that we begin to start thinking in a different way, feeling in a different way, speaking in a different way, and acting in a different way. So this change of goal is very important. Even if you are in the habit of drinking alcoholic drinks, many people try to stop that, but the difficulty comes from the goal that person is seeking. It is only when we begin to understand that we are seeking the wrong kind of goal and we change the goal of life. We change our whole life and that habit is gone. This is the important thing to understand. So when we have understood our problem properly and learned to change our goal in life, then we begin to behave in the proper way. And ultimately, by purifying the mind, we gain freedom from all suffering and attain that highest, most supreme peace of Nibbana. That is the teaching of the Buddha. And Nibbana is not some kind of heaven that you go to. It is a state of mind. The state of mind that is healthy. So it is very important to understand these things, and I hope you understood. And now you can ask questions so that I will try to answer them.
The Chinese monks believe emptiness in the mind. Can you explain to us what they believe in? The Chinese Buddhists believe that there's
That is sunyata. Well, that is a very advanced thing. It's very difficult for you to understand. That means that well, to connect it with what we have just been speaking about, that is, that emptiness simply means that when your mind is purified, a purification is an emptying. You see, if this glass of water is dirty, and I purify the water by filtering it or distilling it, all the impurities are gone, and so it is empty of those things. That is the emptiness. In the same way, we are filled with wrong habits that we have been cultivating from our childhood. So we have to empty the mind of all those things. So the purity and emptiness is the same thing. And it is not only just the emotions that we have to be free from, we should also free our mind of wrong views, wrong kinds of thinking. So it is that purity of mind which is the empty mind. So the empty mind is the happy mind. So we can become happy only by emptying our mind. That's the important thing to understand. So what we call nirvana is not a presence of things. It is the absence of things. So we are not trying to get at a present. We are trying to get at an absence. And to do that, we have to first appreciate the value of emptiness. Normally, most people want to fill their minds or fill their bodies or fill their bank account and all kinds of things, filling. You see, the real happiness comes not from filling, but from emptying. This is the important thing. Now, the Prince Siddhartha was born as a prince, full of all the comforts and luxuries, and then he emptied, gave up everything. He gave up even the thought, I am. That is the highest emptiness. The ultimate emptiness is to free the mind of even the thought, I am. The I has to disappear. This is the importance of emptiness. Now, before we try to achieve Nibbana, we have to understand what we mean by Nibbana. So it is very important to understand that. It is because people don't understand that they are doing the wrong thing. Nibbana is not a presence. It is an absence. So it is the same thing as emptiness. So what the Buddhist has to do is to give up everything, not to start getting things. So the goal is something like it is seeking Nibbana is like going backwards, not like going forward. You keep on giving up things, not getting things. Now you see the normal person, the normal life today, everyone is trying to get things more and more, more and more. Earning money or earning wealth or getting more and more things. But what we call meritorious deeds, what are those things? These are not things where you get things. It is giving up things. Giving for charity, and even being without things. It is mainly purifying the mind. It is not a matter of getting more and more things. This big subject called economics. Today people are talking about economics. What is economics? There was a time when I was trying to understand what economics was. And I found that a certain book was trying to define economics, the word economics. And they said, economics is how the normal human being tries to satisfy their unlimited wants with the limited means. You see, your means are limited, but your wants are unlimited. So however much you satisfy your wants, the wants keep on increasing. So you're always unhappy, dissatisfied. If you say you don't have a vehicle to go on, and you don't even have the money to get a vehicle, so we'll say you collected some money somehow and you start buying a bicycle. So now you can, instead of walking, go on the bicycle. After some time, you see other people going on motorcycles. But you have to be just pedaling this bicycle. So you think, oh, if I had a motorcycle, it will be better than this. So you then begin to buy a motorcycle. And now you are able to ride the motorcycle. So you go on like that. And after some time you begin to see, oh, I am going in this motorcycle, I might meet with an accident also. I should have a car which is going on 4 wheels. Now this is only going on 2 wheels. So you buy a car, a cheap car, because you don't have enough money to buy expensive cars. So you are happy that you have a cheap car. So you go on like that, and after some time you begin to see these other people have better cars than my car. So this is very cheap, not so comfortable, and how nice if I had a more expensive car. And then somehow you collect some money and you buy a little more expensive car. So you'll be happy for a while. And you keep on doing this, so there is no end to this. That's the important thing to understand. This is what normally people are doing, trying to satisfy desires with limited means. And the more we satisfy the desires keep on increasing. There is no end to it. So this is why the Buddha pointed out that the right way to be happy is to give up all these things. But the modern world is going in the opposite direction. During the time of the Buddha, this was not so great, this going after satisfaction and trying to get more and more. People were less interested in these things. But today, more and more people want to satisfy their desires. And even children, they begin to want beautiful things to see, very sweet, pleasant music to hear. They plug their ears with all kinds of things to listen to music all the time. They want perfumes, good smelling perfumes. They want sweet tasting food, and they want comfortable chairs and mattresses and all kinds of comforts to satisfy desires. From childhood they begin to. But this is mainly coming not from Buddhism, it's coming from Western thought. And so they keep on from childhood. They begin to try to enjoy even these sexual appetites, and ultimately they have experienced everything that they can experience by about the age of 15 or 16. And then they get bored with these things, and then they begin to take drugs. They think that is the best way to be happy. And then they go on like that, then they end up with drug addiction, and they don't know how to get rid of that. And some people even commit suicide as a result. And some people get into all kinds of difficulties. So this is why it is so important to understand that life is not a bed of roses. Even if it is a bed of roses, it is full of thorns in it. So it's not only roses, but also thorns. And so it is more important to be worried about the thorns than to be enjoying the roses. So this is why it is very important to understand that the only way to true happiness is to learn to give up these desires and hatreds. The desire for pleasure and the hatred of pain. But this is really not going according to the modern way of living and thinking. This is like swimming against the stream. Now, if you are on the river, and the current of the river will take you down, in a certain direction, and you don't know where you are going, you may get drowned ultimately. But if you can swim against the current and come out of the river, you will become more comfortable. So this is why the Buddha pointed out that the practice of the teaching of the Buddha is like swimming against the stream. Patisotagami. That is the word that the Buddha used. Patisotagami means going against the stream, against the current. The normal current is simply to be carried away by our emotions. And emotions are blind. We have to understand that the emotions cannot think. We have two parts of the mind, the thinking part and the emotional part. It is the thinking part that is aware of the world and the reality of life. But the emotions are blind, and blindly the emotions want what they want and hate what the emotions hate. And if you are carried away by these emotions, you will be suffering as a result. So this is why it is so important to be carried by the thinking part of the mind, not the emotional part. But the modern world is mainly guided by emotions. That's the important thing to understand. So this is why the message of the Buddha is so important today, to point out the way, the true way to happiness.